Hi, I'm Sophie, and I haven't seen a lot of movies.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm here to help with that. And we are
SP Film Viewers.
Well, I like the big giant gorilla, but I also like the big giant lizard. But which is better? There's only one way to find out. Fight! For those of you who don't know what that reference is, it's from a TV thing with Harry Hill. It's only like a thing in the UK, so...
Oh, the guy with the big collar?
Yeah.
Of course I wouldn't know what that is then. But it links quite nicely with the movie that we've watched this week.
Yes, in preparation for the upcoming Godzilla vs. Kong movie that I hope that we do get access to in a couple of weeks, I think. Right, premium access and all that. But we watched King Kong vs. Godzilla, the 1962 Japanese version, rather than the US version for reasons that we'll go into in this episode.
I think it's just Paul likes me reading subtitles now. I think that's what it is. He's like, right, she doesn't mind reading subtitles for anime. I'm going to make her read subtitles for everything, which, to be fair, I'm really easy with the Japanese culture of reading now. That seems to be quite easy to do. Whereas, like, for example, when we've done a couple of French ones.
Like when we did Amelie, you said the pacing on that was quite speedy.
Fast.
Yeah.
So fast. Whereas this is quite easy to read and to catch up. And to be fair, I did say to you at some points, you probably don't even need the dialogue as such. It could be a bit of a still movie where they don't need to speak.
You mean just by the visuals alone?
Yeah, you kind of would get the gist of what was going on. Yeah,
you can tell a story's good if just by visuals alone, and you don't need any dialogue, and you're still understanding what the plot is. You know you've got a solid thing going on there.
So just to give you a little bit of background, you've got two sides of a story. So you've got somebody actually in Japan, which they're wanting a big break and a big story. However, you've got the American people who are in Antarctica, and they keep releasing big news and big stories about like an iceberg lighting up. Mm-hmm. And this is where it's stemming from, where Japan are a little bit like, we've not got the big news, we haven't got a big storyline, and kind of do something a little bit idiotic to want to go and get their story and news to be headlined. So they send a couple of guys out to go to
this place called Faroe Island, I think, or Faroe Island, one of the two descriptions.
A myth, isn't there, about a evil spirit?
Yeah.
So they're wanting to get the headline for this and be the first one on top of the news of this evil spirit, which obviously they've gone to the island, which is like Skull Island, isn't it?
Essentially, yeah. You've
got obviously your islanders there that are somewhat rituals or something, would you say?
Yeah.
Towards it started being a storm and lightning, and then you hear the roaring, because initially they were thinking, oh, well, it's just lightning. They've never seen lightning before, so they don't know how to react to it. And I think this is where you get into a point of where you've kind of seen that Godzilla is going to be coming out of the iceberg, and then you kind of get a glimpse of King Kong. However, you always get the beat of the drum that the Americans are a bit faster relaying their storylines, that every time that the Japan news want to get anything out, big stories already broke, and all the journalists and everything are flooding over to want to find out the big story from America or Antarctica. So it's quite interesting for us, isn't it, to be honest, because I know last Monster March you educated me in King Kong.
And Godzilla.
Separately,
yeah, of course.
And to be fair, I think I know who I'd want to win in a fight.
But I said to you beforehand, thinking, yeah, you're saying that, but then when you actually see what they look like, it might be a different story.
Yeah, no, so I agree completely with you on this. So Godzilla didn't really disappoint me as much. Obviously, I know what he can look like nowadays, and there's no comparisons between what we have today.
Mhm.
Obviously, he does look a hell of a lot more realistic than a man in a costume.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel disappointed in Godzilla. Kong, however, I did.
Yeah, he certainly got the short end of the straw on that one for the design department.
His arms are so long, I don't understand. It's like the person in the actual costume, their arms probably don't even reach that bit, so then when he's trying to move them around,
Yeah.
that bit's not moving, so it looks...
Yeah.
I'm trying to move my arms here and nobody can see me, but I'm like saying it doesn't work, really.
Mm-hmm.
And his teeth, I feel like that was... I don't know. I don't really remember seeing Kong having teeth like so vicious. I feel like these were like played on a lot more, and then when he smiled, he looked a bit goofy.
Yeah.
Like a bit. I don't know. It was really bizarre. Whereas in the one that I fell in love with,
the Peter Jackson one, the remake, yeah.
I don't know. He didn't seem. He was quite still caring in this.
Well, in this one, I wouldn't say he was that caring. He does, protects the islanders from this
he does from
octopus, or
which I have a beef about the octopus.
the taco, as they would call it in Japan.
Yeah,
takoyaki, the nice fried octopus balls that they have on the stick. They're really nice.
They are really, really nice. Like, I don't even think people really, like in the UK, would understand how nice they are. Because when you're just saying, like, it's an octopus ball, but it's not actually an octopus ball.
Yeah.
It's octopus cooked in, like, a batter in a ball shape. I'd say that's literally the equivalent of it. And they're so tasty.
Yeah.
It's like, it just melts in your mouth. And there's this flavour that you can't even describe.
Fishy, I guess, was the best way that you could describe it. But
not over fishy, though.
No. It's just really nice.
It's lovely. Really, really brilliant. So, obviously, I've got a beef with the octopus arriving. First of all, I don't really know if I need to be Googling this on my octopus knowledge.
Right.
But all the way through, I kept on saying I didn't know that they could go on land.
Well, I think the argument there is it's very close to the shoreline. So, it's kind of just looking for the berry juice, which is kind of what is stated in the American version, which I looked into for like differences throughout in comparison to the Japanese one we watched. But that was explained a bit easy, like so that people would know why the octopus was attacking, and it's going for the berry juice that Kong likes.
So not the actual people itself.
No, they're just getting in the way.
I think, to be honest, it's like one of those things where, okay, I get it. So Kong does kind of rescue them. So this bit is somewhat vital to have in it. So you can kind of see that he does protect the islanders.
Yeah.
But then why an octopus of all things? Like, it could be any animal,
What would you prefer it to be?
I don't know, something that's actually on land, because what damage is the octopus going to do? He's not going to get far, is he? Like, he's not going to break down loads of houses in the middle of the town, is he?
He did break one down.
Yeah, that's because it was living really close to the sea. So my note is, don't live close to the sea, and then you're not going to have these problems. Even though it would be lovely to live near the seaside, but you know what I mean.
For us, it wouldn't be giant octopus wouldn't be a big problem.
No.
In the real world.
So I think that was my problem. I think it was just not a bit unrealistic, and it was a case of, well, it's not really a threat, is it? Because after a bit, it's going to get dehydrated and it's going to die.
How long will that take, do you reckon?
I don't know, but...
You want to wait around, just a few days while it destroys everything.
Just leave him, because he's not going to get far, is he?
Yeah, so obviously there's showing footage of the real octopus, and then obviously when it's attacking Kong, it's more of like a prop thing, which you can...
What do you mean by real octopus? Like, actually a real octopus?
Yeah, of course. That's
really?
What I mean. Yeah. That's why I was doing all the slow movements and making all the noises and everything. It was a real octopus. All the slimy...
Oh, don't. So you kind of see that kindness there in Kong, and as well a bit of greed, because it's like, well, don't pinch my juice.
Yeah, which he likes to get wasted on and passes out, and then other tribes kind of like I don't know if it's like a thing to like thanking him, or it's just to put him to sleep because they like, start playing all this drum beats and stuff and all chanting and stuff. It was some sort of ritual to be grateful of him.
And I think that's really nice. Like, I think if you could have, like, Godzilla, you don't really have that connection with him, like, as a do-gooder. Like, Kong is looking after the islanders. Yeah, okay, he's a bit characterful as well, because he's like, he likes to get drunk on this red berry juice, and then let the islanders dance for him and stuff. And I don't know, he just seems to have a bit more character about him. Godzilla, I'm sorry, I don't really know, apart from him coming out of a block of ice. For what reason he was in the ice, I don't actually know.
The reasoning behind that is because in the film that was before that, he was basically frozen in ice as part of that film. That's how that film ended. The one that's in between.
How did he get frozen in ice?
It was just under like a landslide in the glacial region, and then all the ice broke away and get lost at sea, sort of thing. So
Kong just needs to throw some ice at him, is that what we're saying? And then he'll die?
A lot.
Needs a lot of ice. So it's kind of getting on to the point of where you've got Godzilla now.
On his way to Japan.
Yeah, I was going to say migrating like he's a bird. Is that the right wording? No,
probably not. He's just on a mission to get to Japan.
And I did ask you, like, well, why isn't he happy where he is? Like, why is he needing to go back? You were saying it's more like a territorial kind of thing, isn't it? Like
home and instinct. He's been there before, kind of thing, and so he's going back home. Essentially, what he feels is home.
So obviously, we get to a point of where Godzilla gets into Japan, and there's a line that I wrote which kind of made me chuckle, which is obviously now Tokyo are having to evacuate, and this little boy goes, "But Mum, I want to see Godzilla," and she's like, "It's not a zoo," like, and I just really thought of you, Paul, in this, because it's like your love for monsters. If we were in that scenario, like, would you be evacuating, or would you be like, "Oh no, I have to see Godzilla"?
At a safe distance, yeah.
So we actually, I don't know if we mentioned it in our previous podcast when we've obviously touched on Godzilla. Luckily, we've been privileged enough to go to Japan. Yeah. And the closest...
Well, we've definitely mentioned that more than once. But yeah, we went to the Godzilla Hotel in Shinjuku.
And it was really, really by chance, wasn't it? That we kind of somewhat Google mapped it, but somewhat stumbled across it at the same time. Yeah. Because obviously within Japan, everything is big but compact.
Yeah.
So it's not very easy to find things.
No.
But then it is easy when you've got a big giant Godzilla at the top of it that's roaring.
Yeah. Which we've got the pictures of, and we'll post those in our socials. So be on the lookout for those.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to King Kong, basically we get to a point of where the islanders are kind of befriending, obviously, the people from Japan. There was a bit of a funny bit going forward a little bit, obviously trying to get the islanders to give them cigarettes and a radio station, even giving them to children.
Yeah, and the natives all seemed, or some of them at least anyway, seemed to be in blackface.
Yeah, that was kind of a little bit...
yeah, we wouldn't get away with that these days.
No, and it was weird because you could tell when they were dancing, not meaning this in a bad way to any Japanese person, but their culture of dance is so much different to what would be like an island kind of tribal dance.
Right.
You know, it's completely different, and you could kind of...
You're saying Japanese people don't have good dance coordination.
Probably, yeah.
Sorry, anybody who's from Japan is listening.
I think it's more just a slower kind of movement. It's not like
graceful.
Shaking your booty.
Well, they're not twerking for Kong, are they?
They might as well be a little bit. So there is that, and then obviously the two Japanese guys think, "Oh, what a brilliant idea! We're going to kidnap Kong and put him on a raft," which we don't see. We don't see how they kidnap him. We don't see how the hell he get him on that raft.
Yeah, build a raft. How much wood they'd have to use?
Yeah,
and it's like, how would you get away with that with the tribes people? Like, so how can we just borrow Kong for like a week or so?
Exactly, and it's like, well, is it just these two men trying to put Kong on this raft? Like, how do they get him on the raft? Like, I'm not bothered about the fact that they might have been able to build this raft in a couple of days. That's fine. He's a big ass gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did one get one side and the other? I don't think they could have lifted him.
No.
I don't think he'll have gone willingly. So I'm a little bit like, is this really realistic? The islanders are not going to help him, are they?
No.
So it's not feasible, is it?
No, and especially, I'm sure Kong won't have been passed out for that length of time. No. Unless he was really, really pissed.
Yeah. So that bit was a little bit... And it's also a little bit like, well, why are you taking it all the way to Japan? Like, poor King Kong.
Publicity. That's what the whole... the film is sort of about, really. It's all like a bit of a satirical jab at, the TV networks. Like, oh, we want the biggest ratings. We've got to get the biggest showboatiest thing ever to, get the ratings up.
They're not even thinking about the impact on what it could have on the people of Japan or the city of Tokyo. And it's like they're not even thinking, well, what if Kong wakes up and causes a rampage or anything like that? It's just ridiculous.
No.
Oh, so we get to a point of where things are getting smashed, and you pointed out that it were tiny figurines, so like little cars
which are all like, it's a sort of like a staple within these Japanese kaiju monster films, where it's just having little miniatures, and the men in suit are the ones that are just like smashing up buildings and kicking cars and rocks and all that kind of stuff.
Which is clever, and it really is. And initially I wondered if it was like stop frame kind of animation of how they were getting them to move, but you were saying they'd be more like on like motors or something. Or...
I think so. It looks the way that they move. It's not like the Clash of the Titans. It's not that sort of stop motion. Yeah. It would just be something with like little, like say somebody maybe magnets under the little tanks or something, and then just moving them underneath. Somebody underneath the table might be moving them, something like that. I don't know.
What a job, eh? How would they see what they were doing?
Just be directing, right? Just move this way. I don't know.
To the left, to the right.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
So obviously we get to a point of where you've got your main lady that's kind of got her brother, I'd say, that's gone to...
Yeah, it's a brother, yeah.
Gone to get Kong.
Yeah, from the island, yeah.
And then you've got her kind of boyfriend.
Yeah, partner, whatever.
And is he with the Godzilla kind of? Who goes on a boat, doesn't he, in the boat?
Yes, because he's believed to have been the ship gone down or something.
And this is where you get this wonderful scene of where everybody getting off the train. Well, I don't understand the logic, because they go, oh, this train will be stopping because Godzilla's coming. And it's like, well, why can't you just crank the train up a bit, get yourself off and carry on going? Don't just go, oh, Godzilla's coming, we'll stop right here.
Yeah, that makes more sense than going, let's head towards Godzilla at a high speed and hope that his feet doesn't get in the way at that exact moment as he's walking. That's the logic.
But...
That's a lot safer, and as you see, like 2 minutes later, he's like, why are they stopping? And then he proceeds to stamp on the train. It's like, well, I don't know where I'm going to not be when that happens.
Yes, but to be fair, they could have moved faster than that, because then everyone were coming out and they were all screaming and running around, and it's like, well, everyone's going to get squished at this rate. It's just all spiraled out like little ants. But I guess you're right, because it did happen, but. Really logically.
No, not really logically
That would have been fine. But then you get this, don't even get me started on this scene. So obviously she is then united with trying to get, she's running away, isn't she? And then she somehow gets in the water. I don't really know how she gets there.
Just running away.
But run on grass, there's a big field there, love. How have you got down there with the water? And then she's flapping around.
I said to you, didn't I? There was can't remember where I saw it. It was some YouTube. There was the thing of that scene in particular where she's running half moving along and then she's flapping around and it comes up with this little, obviously added in post, this thing that says Magikarp use splash. It wasn't very effective or something. I thought it was really funny.
It is quite apt because she's just floundering around, and no pun intended, but she is, and it's why? I know, okay, Godzilla is scary, but it's not like he's literally just going for you, is he? He's just ploughing along.
Yeah, he's just going, got a goal. He's just walking, essentially. And just things just happen to be in the way, but he's not specifically going after her.
No, he's not.
But
and then obviously she somehow gets reunited with her boyfriend, and he rescues her, and all of that kind of thing. And then I feel like, I don't know why, but somehow it kind of links with, she seems to be more flapping around with Godzilla. Then obviously we get to a point up with King Kong, and he seems to take a shining, obviously, to her.
It's like, oh yeah, of course you do. Of course you happen to pick up the one person who happens to be a protagonist, a main player.
Yeah.
And it's, it happens to be you that he happens to be taking up in his hand, and then trying to recreate the Empire State Building scene from the 1933 version, and it's not that impressive because it's only like a smallish building, and it's like, I'm here now. Like,
but it's nice for me to see that Kong still, because he's not doing it in a malicious way. I'd like to think not. It's more of a, yet again, kind of the, she's pretty, and he's like not wanting to hurt her.
No.
And I like the fact that that's still kind of tied in nicely.
Yeah, right.
So let's go to the fact of when Kong and Godzilla
meet for the first time,
What are your thoughts on this, Paul?
I've looked into this, and it wasn't really the director's choice to have them act the way they act, really, throughout the film, especially when they come to this part. It's more the special effects director who wanted them to appear more like childlike and a bit silly in the antics that they do, because it's very, very much comes across that way in the way they sort of like playing around and like clapping their hands and stuff and everything. It's just very amusing.
It really is, because it surprised me with Godzilla, and it probably made me chuckle, and I couldn't take it seriously. Like, it was meant to be this. I
don't think for what this film is going for, it's really not the intention for it to be taken seriously. I think that once you go in with that mindset, it's with a lot of these films anyway. It's kind of like it's not a super serious, dark thing.
I think I was kind of linking to like the previous films that we've seen, like the more up to date kind of.
Yeah, obviously they're more of a darker tone.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was kind of where my head was going, and I think that's why this really threw me off and kind of made me a little bit hysterical with the way that they were moving and fighting one another. Yeah, because this was meant to be like the fight of the century kind of thing with King Kong and Godzilla. Yeah, and well, Godzilla looked like he was having a paddy for half the time, flailing his arms around. Yeah, Kong, bless him, all he could do was throw rocks. Because, like, I understand there's not much you can do with a man in a costume. Yeah, other than punch and fumble. I don't even think they kicked.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
Obviously, Godzilla used his tail to...
More than often. He's got atomic breath, but he tends to use his tail more than he does anything else. So.
Yeah, that is true. And I think Godzilla, I don't know, I feel like in the first fight he was quite... let me down a little bit.
Who did?
Not Godzilla, King Kong, sorry.
Yeah, he kind of just like scratched his head and walked off after a little while. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to forget this.
But there was a funny bit with Godzilla where he looked like he fell over and he couldn't get back up. And I said to Paul, I wonder if that man couldn't get back up out.
It probably did happen, yeah. Because I imagine it'd be pretty cumbersome having like in that big warm rubber costume, and it's like, I just can't get up. This
like
tail is getting in the way. Yeah.
And I think, because I know, obviously, back in the day, this would have been brilliant, and I don't think people would.
It's very entertaining, I can say that. I'm sure it was back. I mean, the box office figures show that for definite.
I don't know if they'd have laughed at it as much as we laugh at it today, because of where it's progressed. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, yeah.
It'd still be comical, but I don't think it would be half as comical as it is for us. But yeah, Kong just gives in, and I'm like, wait a minute. You're Godzilla, and I like Kong. And I was a bit disappointed. I was like, why isn't my Kong being badass Kong? He can do this. He can take on a giant lizard, breathing whatever he breathes out of his mouth.
Atomic breath.
What's atomic breath? Just like acid breath?
No, like radiation breath.
Why is it blue?
Well, that's the same in the newer versions as well. It's kind of like just like a really powerful energy beam type of thing. So it's, but in this one, it comes more across as like it does like a, and then it's like just an explosive fire method. So it's not really a true effect of like it is in the newer versions, where it's obviously more CGI heavy to get that point across that it is what it is.
I've kind of now not. I know this sounds really bad. My storyline goes a little bit awry here. I kind of now just then would be jumping to the final bit where we have the actual fight.
Okay, right. Well, we'll get to what I've done in my notes, I guess, really with things, and then we'll get to that because obviously that is the very last part. So I guess I'll mainly be talking about things that are differences in the from the US version to the Japanese version that we watched. Really, I think be a good starting point for mine based on my notes. One thing being the score in the Japanese version is like certainly from the opening is very more like orchestral. You got choir going on and everything is very more like gets you in the mood for this epic thing that's going to occur throughout the film.
They do have quite a dramatic score throughout, don't they, really? Even though it's quite surreal in a sense because you have the dramatic kind of scoring and noise that makes it sound like something really badass is going to happen. And obviously it's a mediocre fighting kind of scenes.
Right, okay.
I don't know what it's like in the
US one.
One where...
Yeah, it's more of a more like generic random scores from the Universal Music Archives, really, that take place instead of the soundtrack that's from the Japanese version.
So what are the actual Godzilla and King Kong looking like in the...
Oh, there's no difference there.
There's not, so it's still a man in the suit?
Yes, literally, that's not changed. The actors haven't changed, there's nothing like that. It's what it mainly is it's more integrating the news segments to sort of like explain / dumb down what's going on to people for a Western audience, I guess. But I think it's like you're not doing much service there for, like having to really explain everything. Like Kong is a big giant gorilla kind of thing and he likes berries. And Godzilla is a cross between a Tyrannosaurus and a Stegosaurus, something with a picture book, and it's like, really? Is that what you're going for in terms of that? It's just like, yeah. And one of the things is the meeting with the brother and the sister and her boyfriend.
Yeah.
In the Japanese version, that getting to know them, when he goes to the apartment and stuff, and that's cut out mostly from the US version. It's kind of just them sat at the table eating the food and stuff, so it's kind of like cutting down for editing reasons for the story, but it kind of just seems a bit odd.
Is that just because of the
pace? I feel like the pacing.
So I'm guessing they've got people talking over though within the American version.
Yes, it's dubbed. Yeah.
So do you think it might have been just a lazy part of thinking, do we have to actually dub over
this? I don't
know.
Maybe, but I don't know. It's just them going there. We don't need this bit, really. But it's like, but they still talk about the string, the really strong thread, which comes into play later on. So that's still in there. But things like that, there's big things, chunks where it's like we don't need to have this in the US version for the story, and yet that still feels more coherent than cutting to this guy in America talking about things that we don't really need to know just to explain things. It's just, it makes the experience of the US version not as strong in my eyes, and maybe I'm just being a little bit biased there, but
maybe a little bit because we do have a big love for Japan. But to be fair, I think sometimes it is a case of they do simplify things down and they make it feel a little bit more dumbed down. And I always think the original is the better way of going. Yeah.
I know it might be tricky for people to maybe find this because this is from like the Criterion box set, I would call it, to watch this. So it is tricky. It's not been easy to find. So for most people, it's just been the American version to watch, which is the worst thing in the world. But that's how us lot over here in the West have probably seen it, if we have at all. One thing I didn't bring up from the last thing, the Clash of the Titans, was the thing about, like, gods and deities. Like with when they're on the Faroe Island and there's the lightning coming down
Yeah.
and they're all doing the praying and stuff, and it's kind of like pointing out the thing, the tribes or how people saw things back in the day and like way back, that when how these stories came about, like gods and monsters and stuff, they always thought that natural disasters such as earthquakes, lightning storms, and things like that were gods
Having an argument.
or something like that, because
being
that's
upset
the
or-
only way they feel like they could explain what those
What's going on.
phenomenons were.
Oh, God was crying, should we say,
Oh.
if it's raining.
I don't know, maybe to that extent, perhaps, but yeah.
No, but I kind of can understand that. So do you think we should be worried about that? Because we've had quite a bit of bad weather. We had a lot of snow and torrential rain. But what I kind of thought was quite interesting at the beginning, we get to see on the news that there is all these kind of, the Antarctica, it's slowly melting.
Yeah.
And it's causing issues and everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's global warming. Do they not know about global warming? But probably it wasn't a thing back then.
Well, they weren't as worried, but it's obviously still been going on for forever, it seems.
I feel like it doesn't feel like there might have been as much of a big thing as it is now.
Yeah. So despite all the cuts and stuff, the US version is like 7 minutes shorter than the Japanese version, and yet the Japanese version seems more cohesive in what it's saying with this longevity of the storyline. But I think maybe there's things like Mr. Taco, who's the very eccentric TV network person who's like wanting it for Pacific Pharmaceuticals things, being like King Kong being the sponsor for his show and everything, being his performance might come across as a bit silly, I think, maybe for Western audiences. So things like that, they feel like they might have not got across to them or something like that. But I feel like the Japanese version has the better flow from having more insight into this whole commercial perception of King Kong, you know, the reasoning why he's wanting, you know, because the ratings of the show, his network are going down, everything, and it's kind of explaining that a bit more, whereas the news stories that are going in through the thing explaining all this stuff is just not unnecessary in relation to that. So
do they not have him as a character at all in the American version?
Yeah, they do, yeah, but it's again cutting
it down
that part to have people explain stuff. Sorry, I keep repeating myself.
No, it's fine. So I'm just wanting to get the gist. So they do have the same people, but it's kind of shortening. Is it more the Japanese?
Yeah, like
side
some of the
things.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, just to make place for that.
But weirdly, do you know when I was watching it, I actually enjoyed the Japanese.
Yeah, it's got the good. I feel like it's got the good balance there with just like the calm and everything.
Before the storm, so to speak. Yeah. Also, it's character building. Like otherwise,
exactly. Yeah. You just kind of just flitting between here's the thing and then right back to that, and just the shortcuts that don't really need to be done. It's just a weird way of editing it all, really. But yeah, so I think obviously getting near to the end of the final confrontation between King Kong and Godzilla, but there's a part before that though we're gonna miss a little bit of where it's trying to stop Godzilla getting through with these high tension wires and with electricity, and he's like, oh, I can't get through there. But King Kong just like starts nomming down on the electric wires.
And I'm like, wait a minute, how's this even happening? Like, Godzilla's got radioactive breath. Why can't you just like blast through it? And Kong, I'm like, well, why is he hurting his teeth? Like, I'm like, stop it, you're going to electrocute yourself. I don't know why. I felt like if anybody out of the two...
Yeah, logically you think that, wouldn't you? But
Godzilla would be fine and Kong would be frazzled.
Yeah, there was a point where you pointed out as well that it was like a funny bit. It was like a, how am I going to get through this?
Godzilla was like looking like a toddler, you know, when like you've touched fire and then you're like kind of...
Yeah, hot oven, or something.
Yeah,
hot stove.
And you're like, your mum's telling you not to touch it, and you're looking like, okay, I've touched it, ow, that hurt, right, okay. How do I now not tell my mum I've touched it and try and get out of this? But at the same time, there's still the lure of wanting to touch it again to see what will happen, even though you've already kind of... That toddler aspect again of Godzilla coming out. He's had a paddy, now he wants to touch something he shouldn't.
Well, I looked into the reason because watching the American version myself a while back, and they still didn't really explain as to why what the reasoning behind King Kong being immune to electricity and all that. And
Can I have some guesses?
yeah, by all means.
So is it either he's really, really high on that berry juice, that he's kind of that drunk, he doesn't realise he's getting electrocuted? Is it that he's secretly Thor and he's like the king of lightning? No? Is it because there's no logic in this film and
maybe a little bit, but there is a good reasoning behind in a sense. It's more of a industry storyline script reason behind it.
I'm interested because you actually withheld this information. Like, I was like, wait a minute, why?
Yeah.
And you normally, bless you, kind of give me a little heads up, and you haven't with this. It's been quite annoying until we've done this podcast. So please, why?
Okay. So
it better be good.
Well, I mean, it's quite interesting, so I hope people do find it interesting as well, who may not know. The script initially didn't include Godzilla. It's basically this guy called John Beck, who kind of ripped off the original story from Willis O'Brien, who was the stop-motion director behind King Kong in the first one, in which King Kong fought Frankenstein's monster in like a big kaiju version of that. But he couldn't sell the story or the script to an American producer, so he took it to Toho Studios in Japan, who were on board with it, but they switched Kong's role in the film for Frankenstein's monster, who people know that Frankenstein's monster was born through lightning coming through and bringing him to life.
Yeah.
And then Godzilla was made the secondary monster in this film, in this version of the script. So by that logic, that's why they just kind of kept that part in it.
I feel like that kind of weakens it though, because really, to me, I don't know why, I feel like Kong shouldn't be able to do that.
I know it doesn't make sense in a logical sense. There's no like real connection there to a normal person as to why that is. It's not like,
it's like Kong is a normal animal, but just scaled up, isn't it? Like like in Pokemon where you maximize them or whatever it is.
Yeah, so it's a bit like in Pokemon where you can have like monsters and being any sort of type, being any sort of form, based on any sort of animal, and they can be any type. Like you could have an electric gorilla for whatever reason, and that makes sense in that universe. But in the context of this, it doesn't. There's no real understanding as to why he would be and have the electric powers. He's not got like lightning bolts on his skin or anything like that, any patterns or anything like that. It's just.
I think that's what it is, and I don't know why I'm leaning towards that Godzilla should be able to.
Because he's got the radioactive powers, and he's got I
feel like that shouldn't really affect him. I don't know why in my head. It was a bit peculiar for me, and it's still a little bit of a wishy-washy excuse. It was like it's kind of like, oh well, this is what it should have been. So I just kept it in.
Yeah, it's really just a means of because King Kong doesn't have, other than his fists and his height and his strength, he doesn't really have any powers, where this is a means of, he can have the power of electricity to power him up, and that's more the crux of how he, say in quotation, wins the fight at the end.
Well, does he win?
They kind of make it out at the end that he did win, but to be fair, the way it ends, it doesn't really end. The fact that I know, and other people may know, that Godzilla is a bit like a phoenix. He kind of just keeps coming back no matter what. Anyway, but there's nothing to suggest the way that it happens that he does die because he's aquatic and they just fall in the water and everything. But what did you make of the fight anyway at the end?
I don't know. I was a bit torn at the end. I felt like it was a bit animal cruelty. It was like, especially with the electric bolts and stuff like that. So I felt a bit sorry for Godzilla initially, because obviously he's not really used to power lines and everything like that and getting electrocuted. But then when they were fighting one another, it was a little bit like, oh, please just stop. I don't like it. One minute I'm like rooting for Godzilla.
Well, yeah, you kept doing that. It's like, well, you wouldn't do that on a real like wrestling match. You put a bet on something. Like, oh, change my mind. I want the other person to win because he's not winning at this particular moment in time. I think
I really was just rooting for whichever was the underdog, wasn't I? It was like, initially I was all Kong.
Yeah. And
I still think, to be fair, I am Kong. I would want Kong to win, really. But I don't want any of them to get really hurt, because But I do feel like sometimes it is a bit animal cruelty towards them, because it's like, well, neither one belong there.
Yeah.
And it's like then other people are getting hurt and injured, and then they're getting scared of it, so they're like, oh, well, I've got to kill it. And it's like, well, if you hadn't brought it, like, for example, Kong in the first place, none of this would have happened, and you wouldn't have had to be half as many casualties and deaths.
Yeah.
But the fight was quite intense a little bit for its age of the film and the fact that it was two men in costume.
Yeah. Definitely entertaining.
It's definitely entertaining, and I didn't know which way it was going to go. Obviously, you think Kong's going to win because obviously it's Kong versus Godzilla. So you see, I don't know why within that it gave me a little bit of logic that Kong might have had the upper hand, because it is to do with Kong, isn't it? Really, more than Godzilla.
Yeah, I guess you can look at it that way. It's kind of, especially with what I explained about them being Godzilla being also the secondary monster. It's sort of more King Kong's travels from an island to Japan for the purpose of television publicity. But
you get more of Kong's story. You don't really get to understand why Godzilla, like, for example, I wouldn't even know why I was in an iceberg.
Yeah, unless you maybe seen the other film, but I guess you kind of just gloss over that a little bit and just, it's a monster that's been frozen in the ice for however million years, and that's just been the context behind that, I guess, really.
I do think Godzilla looks more realistic than Kong in this.
I'd say from what I've seen of films of various different iterations, more the suits ones, obviously, not the CGI ones that we have today. This is probably one of the ones who looks the most reptilian, which is kind of like how I really see him, really, whereas the other ones are more like shorter snout and everything going on with the way he looks in his costumes and stuff. But it's interesting how sometimes he can have different outfits, I guess, for the person whoever's in the costume.
No, I agree with you. I think he did look quite realistic. Whereas Kong, I don't know. Even though when we watched the older King Kong one, that was really hard work for me. I know I didn't enjoy that as much as the newer one where he was CGI. I think it was a little bit like, this is just not realistic, and the suit was still not great.
Well, it wasn't a suit in that one. That was stop motion for the most part, and other than the fact that when it was the close up, but as you said, it's like like a big.
Just goofy with the mouth. I don't understand. But no, what did you think of the end battle, so to speak?
I really enjoyed it, yeah. It's a lot of fast cuts here and there, and it's kind of just very entertaining, the playfulness of it all.
Yeah, like, for example, King Kong trying to stick a tree down Godzilla's throat.
That's hilarious. I hope that makes an appearance in this new version somehow. Just a little nod to that. That'd be great.
I was like, oh, right, okay, now this is getting a little bit sick, this is.
Like, eat it! Yeah. Eat it!
You must eat your greens. Is that how adults feel about children, like sticking mini broccolis down the throat or something?
Maybe. But, you did say as well, a good job of these rocks here, because that's half the thing sometimes, there's batting them around between like a tennis match. Pretty much.
Because obviously, initially, I think Kong has wised up that Godzilla has this breath, even though he doesn't use it.
No, you should. I feel like he should use it a bit more, but I guess that's maybe the pyrotechnics and safety reasons. Maybe it's like, just use it sparingly, just when it counts for something.
And as well, I think it wouldn't be a fair battle, really.
No.
Because Kong would never get to Godzilla.
Yeah. But
like, if that's would be it, wouldn't it? Because he'd just be fried up.
That's the logic as I see it, really. But I don't know, from these trailers of the new one that's coming out, it's kind of looks like they are sort of doing it in favour of Kong. Kind of like he's trying to do the breath, and it's like, oh, I missed it, and then I'll just dodge and just punch you in the face, or whatever. But it's like, I don't know.
No, I'm gonna love that.
So it'll be interesting when that comes around, as to still be Godzilla's my boy, so I'm gonna be on his side no matter what.
What about Kong?
No.
Kong's lovely. What is it about Godzilla, apart from the fact that he's like a reptilian dinosaur, and obviously you love dinosaurs? Is that the main premises of why Godzilla is like your boy?
Oh, that's the main reason, yeah. But it's just a character that really appeals to me more than just a big ape, really. That's all. He's not particularly interesting in that sense. It's kind of just...
He's a big ape with a big heart. Godzilla won't protect islanders.
He does in some films.
He's just out for himself, isn't he, really? King Kong protects islanders. He falls in love. You know, he's got more emotional connection for me, personally. I think I get what you mean, like, with Godzilla's appearance. Like, yeah, he looks more badass. But then Kong has a heart. And that'll win me over every time. So we end up kind of seeing the scene of where they kind of fall into the water, and then Kong decides, right, I'm going home now. I've had enough.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, I'm sick of these people. Why did they bring me here? I'm done my job. Now I'm just gonna
go home now and have
some berry juice.
Yeah. Put my feet up and watch my islanders dance.
Yeah. Right, so let me just check our notes. If there's anything else we missed.
There is one scene that I want to pick up on that we just didn't kind of... I think it was me backtracking a little bit.
Yeah.
It was with the scene of trying to get Kong towards Godzilla.
Yeah.
And it seems that they get like these balloons or something.
Yeah, obviously that comes back around with the really strong thread to lift him up in these balloons to get him to where he needs to be to fight Godzilla at Mount Fuji.
Like, how convenient is that these balloons just take him exactly where Godzilla is? Also, the fact that he looks like something on a float.
Yeah, he looks like a what is it? Well, you said up initially.
Yeah, I did.
And then you kind of said like, there's things in America. And it's like, yeah, the Macy's Day Parade balloon. Yeah, something.
Big float, and it was like really, really surreal, like the logic of it. But obviously, the string needed to come back somewhere, didn't it?
Yeah, that's the means of justification of getting him to from point A to point B. And then when he comes to where he gets near the mountain, and he kind of like moving around, and it looks like he's like a puppet essentially.
He does, he does.
Yeah,
and it comes across quite comical of how it's kind of all panned out and come together, really. But it's really light-hearted to watch.
And and shortly after they like let him go down the mountain, he kind of does like a slide down the mountain, do like a kick to Godzilla, and then he takes a tumble. It's really funny.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you got to laugh at it. Just the silliness and absurdity. It's just really great. So before we get to scoring, there's some other things I guess to bring up. So as part of Toho Studios' 30th anniversary, this was seemed like a good marketable film to bring out, and also be a good revival of Godzilla from the success of the first two films, which were 1954 to 1955. So it's a good long period between the films to sort of like bring them back into resurgence. Televised professional wrestling was pretty popular at the time in Japanese TV, so you can see that kind of come to play. The whole versus one another, and there's all the rough and tumbles that are going on.
Whacking with the tail.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So, like I said before, it was intended to be more humour infused within the human storyline to kind of like break up from obviously the two monsters fighting. But like I said already about the special effects director, kind of incorporated that into the monster fights as well, but proved really successful at the box office, and kind of proves that just really worked, and it kind of proved to the studio that Godzilla was very profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was sort of like franchise which was still ongoing, and from so many more other films, the studio, and then kind of bringing them back in other iterations and stuff. So it's kind of just like for an ongoing thing. I
still think, though, to be fair, they should have King Kong on a building somewhere in Japan.
Well, I think that is really more American.
They're not as cool as Japan.
That's more or less. If I want to explain anything else, I'll just be talking as I'm explaining my scoring, really. So, Sophie, what would you give King Kong vs. Godzilla?
I don't really know. It's really tricky because it has some really good, strong parts, has some weak parts, and I think also it has me giving some biased opinions. Which I guess this is what this is about.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the whole storyline of the Japanese kind of side of things, getting to see the culture again. I quite enjoy that.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like we are picking up a little bit of the more wordings even I am. So there was delicious.
Oishi.
I straight away knew what that meant when he said it, which is strange. I didn't even have to read the subtitles. I just knew what it was.
Right.
So I quite enjoyed that. And obviously when they're saying arigato gozaimasu and stuff like that, and then
But
saying hello and goodbye. So there's perks there for me just personally.
Learning.
Yeah. And then obviously King Kong, he still had his lovely characterable traits and kind of admirable sides. But God, his costume was shocking.
But I will say this about him: his roar is pretty terrifying. I'll give him that. He's very intimidating in that respect.
Godzilla's roar is a little bit. Meh.
I don't know. It's very iconic. Couldn't not distinguish that as being his. But anyway, that's why another thing I like about him is his iconic roar. But
It's not very scary though.
No, but he'd be coming.
Yeah. Sounds a little bit more electrical to me.
Yeah. I think that's maybe.
But you can't break through wires, which is still dumbfounding me a little bit. I think I don't really care for the American kind of scenes when it kind of flips back and forth. I know it's giving you a bit of knowledge when they're in the Pacific.
Antarctica. That's not very much heavily played on in the Japanese version, though, is it?
No, but it just flips a bit back and forth, and I'm like, actually, I'm a lot more enjoying it when it's more in Japan.
Yeah.
If I'm honest.
Yeah. But that doesn't, to be fair, that doesn't last for very long in the submarine anyway. It's kind of just... And another thing we forgot to mention about that is there's the Japanese subtitles for the Japanese on those parts when the Americans are talking, which is like obviously on the site, it's not at the bottom like we read our English subtitles for when the Japanese are speaking. It's on the side, and it's really interesting to see that. I don't think I've really clocked that before.
Did you know I didn't clock it the first time, did I? I didn't even notice it when you mentioned you had to fast forward it back for me. Rewind it back for me so that I could see it.
Yeah.
So my scoring, there was comical side, which I actually do have a bit of a funny bone sometimes.
Yeah, you did laugh quite a bit.
I did quite laugh. So obviously that definitely gives me perks. And I think it was laughable in two ways. It was laughable because it was kind of unrealistic.
Yeah.
But laughable as well because it was like you knew it was two men in a suit. How warm must they be? And kind of trying to fight one another as well. I think definitely people should go and watch it, or if they don't have access to the Japanese version, to go watch the American version, even just for the fight with Godzilla and King Kong, because that'll be the same. That's not going to change.
No.
I think probably for me, it would be a solid 7. Is that okay? Is that?
Yeah, no, that's...
I can't give it much higher because...
I was expecting a bit lower, to be honest, but I'm happy with that scoring.
Because I can't give it much higher because obviously, like, when you've seen Godzilla and King Kong in their higher forms of actual...
modern age. Yeah.
It kind of spoils it a little bit when there is a man in a suit and it doesn't look as realistic. I think back in the day, this would have been brilliant and it's still been humorous.
Mm-hmm.
But because they didn't know what we know now, you can't compare.
Yeah, it's easy to say that though, isn't it?
What about you then?
For me, I really like the comedy aspect it has from both in the human storyline and the monster elements that it has, which is really effective. Certainly, the tone of the Japanese, the way they do humour, is really kind of got accustomed to a bit more now.
Yeah.
Like there's a part when it's kind of, but again, it's more almost like Charlie Chaplin kind of thing with like a physical gag with like he's about to lean on the TNT switch. He's like, no, don't do that kind of thing, and then he goes to try and do it again. It's just like that's really enjoy stuff like that and everything. I was never really, you never really get too bogged down with when you see the humans. It's never like, oh no, get to the monsters like you do with certain modern films.
Yeah.
And certainly with this one, I can say is definitely it seems to have a good balance between
The two.
the humans and the monster fights. Whereas I've watched some of the other Godzilla ones, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, it really drags it out, and then it's like a couple of glimpses right at the very end almost.
And then the big
like,
battle comes in.
yeah, and it didn't last that long, and it's just like, yeah, we've sat all the way through for this.
Does trickle it in, and you get I don't know if it's because there's two of them as well.
Yeah, you get to see more of that. The monsters themselves, like I say, they're just really, really funny, and it's kind of like you don't have to take it too seriously. I know what to expect going in from these ones anyway. It's just you're just there to have a laugh at them essentially, even if that wasn't the case back in the day.
Yeah,
but it's really good, and I love it. So I think I will give this one a 8 out of 10.
Okay, that makes you feel better. Yeah. It's not like you're high-ing it.
Oh no! It's definitely one of the best. I can see why it did really well in terms of the Showa era of Godzilla franchise. So yeah, I can definitely see why it did so well. But I will say, if you can, try and seek out the Japanese version. I think you may culturally get a bit more from it.
And
but
a bit more better storyline.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously I didn't show you that, so I saw that on my own time, but because then you would be like complaining like the Pokemon one, oh, I've seen this, and this would essentially be the same thing, not even with different visuals as such. It's kind of like almost the same.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah,
once I've seen it.
Yeah, but would you watch this one again?
I would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow.
No.
Yeah. No,
but
definitely.
It was entertaining enough to revisit again. But I don't know if this reflects on like watching any of the other kaiju films. I know we did also watch Mothra at the weekend, but you said that wasn't as...
That was a bit more... I think that was kind of, like you're saying, the monster didn't really appear that much, and I was quite disappointed with Mothra, just because obviously it's the only queen kind of like female monster that we're aware of. And I really wanted to see a lot more of her, and I didn't really get that. It was just a bit long-winded, I felt, personally.
Yeah, it's essentially, I guess it's sort of almost like an origin story of her to introduce her, because she appears in like some other the Godzilla films and stuff, like kind of like helps him out or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of having to do that story, like where did she come from kind of thing.
Which is fine, and I don't mind seeing that, but I think it'd be nice to have a little bit more of her. It was just like you were waiting around to see it, and then she wasn't even in a true form for half of it.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So that's why I was a bit hesitant to include that in the Monster March, to be fair, but I feel like it's kind of an important part of it anyway, you know, of the franchise or the kaiju series. So, but yeah.
But I do think, obviously, if you were going to ask me which one to compare to, I would definitely say I'd want you to watch or recommend to people the Kong versus Godzilla compared to Mothra.
Right, okay.
Probably being a lower score if we're reviewing Mothra.
Right, okay. Do you think this may be I know we've got one more to do, but do you think this is probably the winner of the month?
I think it might be.
Yeah.
Depends on what you're going to make me watch next week.
Okay. I haven't quite decided on that yet. We've got two choices, but we might do a little voting and get the public to decide.
It might be better then if they decide instead of you. Come on, be kind to me, people.
So, with that being said, thank you very much for listening to this episode, and be sure to check out all our other Monster March episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever else you might get your podcasts from. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a review and score us 5 stars. It does help, people find our show and get the word out about us, and that's very much appreciated. So if people could do that, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would definitely help us a lot, and I definitely think people would love to listen to us, especially me.
And of course, we're on Twitter and Instagram under the handle SP_filmviewers.
So I'm assuming that the polling kind of the voting of next week's will be more on Instagram.
I think it'll be both, actually. I can probably get more
You
things.
sound old. I don't even know how you do that on Twitter. I'm like...
I'll just do a tweet and see what people say and share it around with the people.
Just so that if anybody is listening and wanting to vote, that they know where to go.
Yeah. That'll be there. So thank you very much for listening, and we will speak to you next time.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and definitely check out our others. And we'll speak to you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.